welcome back to the Sales Revolution. I'm Ingrid Maynard, Managing Director and founder of The Sales Doctor. I'm joined today by a very special woman, Stephanie Christopher. Stephanie has extensive general management, sales, marketing and strategic consulting experience in Australia, New Zealand and Asia. She's currently the Managing Director of the Executive Connection, or TEC, in Australia and New Zealand, soon to become Vistage, the world's largest CEO and peer advisory organisation with over 45,000 members globally across 35 countries. Stephanie has particular interest in the needs of CEOs and business leaders of SMEs. Welcome, Stephanie.
Ingrid, it's lovely to join you. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, you know, you had me as a guest on your podcast, so it's lovely to have you back and to be able to return the favour. And when we were speaking on that podcast, we realised that we were kindred spirits for sure. And for the last 25 years, you've had a sales leadership lens over key roles across each organisation you've worked for. I'm curious to get your perspective on how having a sales leadership background has given you an advantage in your 10 years as managing director compared to someone who may have come from, say, finance or accounting or another discipline.
It's a really interesting question. And I think as a kindred spirit, you'd know that if as a leader you have a sales background rather than perhaps a more traditional finance background, you know, going through that leadership path, you can question yourself about, do I know enough about business? You know, this is, and of course I do, and I have enough experience in business, but sales is a very particular discipline and art. And where I think it does create an advantage in leadership are some of the core skills of a successful salesperson. And one is optimism, that belief that there's a way around a problem, belief that wherever you are now, you'll get the outcome eventually, because once you figure a way through it, you believe in yourself, you believe in your problem-solving capabilities, and you believe in the outcome. So I think that's one thing, the sales optimism. And then I think there's a couple of other really important skills of selling, and that's influence and persuasion. And leadership is all about influencing. It's about galvanizing the right people at the right time. And that's sales leadership. You know, there's a lot of galvanizing there, as Pat Lencioni says. But I think persuasion, well, that's core to selling, persuading people to buy from you ultimately. And I think it's such an important skill for a leader.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that in any leadership role, people look to the leader for how they should be thinking, feeling, seeing the market, seeing their role. So that optimism is critical. Getting a way around, you know, to the outcome that you want. I think that salespeople, successful salespeople anyway, are incredibly resilient people and can-do people. They'll find a way until until success. And you're absolutely right when you said influence and persuasion skills. If we're going to be effective communicators of direction, particularly when we're talking about change or we're trying to galvanise people, as you so beautifully said, we need to have those skills. Otherwise, our message is going to fall flat. It's not going to land properly in the way that it should in order to, you know, to inspire people to take the right action.
I think there's something also, though, as you know, if I thought back again, coming into leadership with a sales background, what the a pitfall to avoid is playing that galvanizing or that sales style of communication at the right time. Because I think that if you're coming into a somewhat conservative organization, as I did, that people can be put off a little bit by what they might view as salesy, and which you and I wear as an absolute badge of honor. And I think it's, if I could reinvent myself a little or go back, I'd probably be mindful of who my audience was and what are the sales skills then, because a good salesperson knows how to persuade people who are different kinds of people.
Absolutely. When you were even saying that, I was thinking, actually, I think that is another one of the skill sets of an effective salesperson, is really being able to land a message regardless of who the audience is. And I think there's a lesson in what you just said too about salespeople being taken seriously when they're going for more senior or executive roles. And part of that credibility building is about being able to communicate in a commercial way that demonstrates the bigger picture beyond just revenue generation, which is particularly important at the moment, for a lot of businesses that are, looking at bottom line.
Yeah, I think just first back to your first point about good salespeople being able to adjust their message depending on who they're talking to. I have a favourite article that was in HBR actually in 2002, and it was written by Bob Miller from Miller Hyman and someone else, called Change the Way You Persuade. I don't know if you know it. And he talks about the buyer and different kinds of people. He talks about a charismatic buyer, is it a cynic, something, a word like a cynic, a controlling buyer, a follower, and what's the right persuasion technique for a salesperson. And that article, I wasn't even in sales when I first read it. And then 10 years after that, I was sitting next to Bob Miller from Miller Hyman at an event. And I said, I've got this great article I love. And he said, I wrote it.
Oh, I told you I loved it.
And I went, oh, yeah, that's right. You're actually a really big deal. But it's something that every now and then, every few years, I do pull up again and think about that. And I think so my hint for a salesperson going into leadership would be to look actually at that article, but look at that idea of who are the different types of people you're influencing and what is it that they're looking for. And yeah, I've always found that really helpful.
Yeah, that is really helpful. Oh, that's so funny when you said that you were sitting right next to him and quoting him back to himself. And I was thinking of, Anchorman, Ron Burgundy, where he says, I'm kind of a big deal. That's where my head went with Mr. Was it Mr. Miller or Mr.
Miller, Bob Miller. Mine actually went to When Harry Met Sally, when they're having the blind date, the two couples, and she says something like, I read that quiche is the something of the masses, and he said, I wrote that. That was kind of that. Like
Yes, it would have been exactly like that. That's a better analogy. Tech, soon to be Vistage International, gives its members access to what is now a global network of like-minded CEOs, experts, speakers and chairs. What's your approach to ensuring that each of these key stakeholders or customers knows that they matter to Tech or Vistage International?
Yeah. So we'll be Vistage Australia and New Zealand
Vistage
will be
Australia.
our title. Easy. I think it's about, like it is with every customer, meeting them where they are. And so what are they looking for, and what would be a win for them from this? And one of the reasons that I was so excited about becoming part of Vistage, truly becoming part of Vistage beyond being a licensee, was there actually is something for every customer, for our members, for our chairs, for our experts, and for my team. And I think it's about understanding what value is for each of those customers. And so for our members, I know that in aggregate, they don't want the fundamentals to change. They want to be part in a room of trusted, non-competitive peers. And that's what they want. And they want to be guided by a very good chair, CEO mentor. Now, that is the model, the Vistage model in 35 countries. So I'm very confident that basic value proposition for our members, our customers, doesn't change. But what is exciting for them, I know, is access to additional thought leadership. Vistage we have featured speakers a couple of times a year. So James Clear is holding an event just for Vistage members. And so we're bringing that to our members in Australia and New Zealand. And then we're supporting our chairs to be able to help our members apply everything they learn from that wonderful thought leader in their groups. So that's one thing that's an and. We have a wonderful global platform called My Vistage that again has thought leadership, a number of different tools on it. There's international networks on that platform as well, that our members will have access to all of that, as well as keeping the core value proposition. So for me, it's about where is each of our customer groups now, where do they want to be, and how can being part of Vistage help them?
Yeah.
Now for our chairs, a number of our chairs already have embraced being part of a global network of chairs. A dedicated group go to the international conference, and a number of them in group,
Yes.
go to the international conference in the US every year, and they just thrive on learning from their peers. Well, we're able to bring a lot of that here. At our chair conference coming up in August, we have one of the best chairs from the US coming to be with us at that. And the learning, and again the thought leadership for chairs, and the community is something that's really exciting. So for that customer segment of chairs, again, I know what they value, and I know that being part of Vistage gives them even more of what they value, and that's something that's important, I think.
Yeah. I mean, they're two of the most fundamental customers, aren't they, to Vistage? You're absolutely right. How do you go about measuring the strength of those relationships?
Well, retention. I mean, members who value what we do, members who value their group, and even members who value the community, even those members who realise that perhaps their group isn't the right group for them anymore, and when they realise that they're part of a broader network and they can move, then that's valuable too. So those members that we retain is the biggest measure of success. There's measures, and we have wonderful stories of members who achieve great things for their businesses and for themselves, and actually attribute that to being part of tech and Vistage. So the stories are really powerful. I mean, there's metrics like any business, but the stories are so powerful, and the chairs share such powerful stories of the impact that the group, and of course that they have had as a chair on their members. And that's a huge measure of success. The chairs tell us pretty straight if they're experiencing value or not from being a chair. But those chairs who say, and Jerry, you've spoken to Jerry Kleeman, who say, I'm in, I'm on board, I'm all in, I'm embracing this. How can I help? How can I be part of it? How can I support? Then that's a real measure of success as well.
Yeah, for sure. I've actually had three tech chairs on here. One retired, but yeah, it's. I mean, I just love those relationships that I've been privileged enough to form with each of them as well. And the other thing that I think demonstrates the strength of the value that not only members have, but also, the strength of the relationships that, Vistage has with the chairs is in the attendance of those events. I mean, I remember that event that I attended in Adelaide. I mean, that was just pretty much a who's who of, of businesses in Adelaide. I would say it's also the referrals. There's a waiting list for most of the groups. Some of those tech chairs have to make a decision about whether they, branch out and start a second group based on their pipeline of people who have heard from either a colleague or a friend who also has a business that they think could benefit, to want to be a part of it. They've seen the success for themselves. They think, well, there's got to be some secret sauce there that I'm missing out on. And also, like you said, about the retention, but it's the length and depth of service. Some of those chairs, it's not unusual to have them there for, over 20 years, over 25 years in some cases, for almost as long as it's been in Australia, which is testament to the strength of the relationship, because they don't have to be part of that group.
No, well, they don't. They don't. And they have choices and more choices all the time, I think we still have a most compelling proposition for current and prospective chairs. And I think being part of Vistage now makes it even more compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, what do you think the benefits are for members of having fellowship with like-minded CEOs?
Look, there's the word perspective that comes to mind. So I like the model our head of research and development, Joe Galvin, talks about. And he talks about the CEO decision model. And he says that as leaders, you have strong instinct. It's got you to where you are. Your instinct is good. And you may have started a business or you may be leading a business. And then the next stage of the model is judgment. And judgment comes from experience. So, if I do that, I will fall off a cliff. Or I'm going to make this hiring decision because I'm going to back a somewhat inexperienced new team member, but I think they're going to fit in really well and I can teach them what to do. But perspective is something you don't just automatically get by being a leader.
Right.
And for our members, it's the perspective from your peers who actually have no skin in the game in your business, but they back you so much as a leader that they really are generous. I see it in groups. I'm a member of a group, and I just see the generosity about other people's success. So there might be a member who's struggling, in the business or struggling even personally, but they are so happy for another member achieving their goals, and they want to learn from it. So seeing that that's a positive thing, but tell me how you've done it. How did you handle this thing? That's perspective. Or someone saying, as my fellow members, my wonderful fellow members have said to me, that's not right. That's not you, Steph. Or you're missing here, or here's a blind spot, or you're not dealing with this or that. That's perspective. Or, sometimes when people, I can see what you're going through, but sometimes when people are going through that, it's often not that, it's this. And that is so valuable for CEOs and business owners, because You can't get that from your leadership team because you have to have that separation. You can't get that from your board because that's a different relationship. And your partner will be sick to death of hearing about it.
And sometimes it's quite troubling to bring some of those issues home. You don't want to concern, a partner with those things. I really appreciate particularly two things that you said there. One was that judgment comes from experience, and we can talk about, our own personal experience. But just as you were referencing perspective from peers, I thought actually that feeds back into getting more experience without having to experience it oneself. Because when I'm hearing about other people's experience over and over and over, and they're giving me their insights that they've gleaned from that experience, they're giving me those perspectives either from my own situation or even from their own, I'm gathering more experience than I would ever have just on my own, or just, with a couple of people. When I'm in a room with 12-ish, trusted colleagues who are all in non-competing businesses, I feel comfortable opening up. I feel comfortable talking about my issues. I feel comfortable knowing that there's a chair there who's going to direct and facilitate that conversation, who's going to draw down, because of their rich experience with each of those members, going to know who to draw out to help a particular member. It's a very treasured place. That's been my experience.
Look, it is, Ingrid, and it's so interesting how quickly a group of strangers can open up.
Right.
I even see it when we have new chairs in for training, which I love. It's always so exciting to have the people who are kind of buying into the proposition and kind of get, but don't know. It's all unfolding what we do. And when we run through some of the activities that are part of the model of Vistage, I always say at the end, you don't know each other. And look at how open you have just been about your business, about yourself as a leader, and even about what's going on for you in your lives. And I think that's the power of the room. And the good chairs, as you kind of talk to, and I love that, they really extract the value from the room, from the group. And I know I just go home from my own Vistage meeting each month, and I'm just kind of playing over what so-and-so said, or what I saw, or what was the look on that person's face when I said X, or just as importantly as a member, it's contributing to someone else's success.
Oh.
It is so powerful, and it also validates your own learning and experience and judgment when someone brings an issue or an opportunity to the group, and as a fellow member you're able to give a perspective that you can see really opens up a whole different way of thinking for a colleague. And that, Vistage teaches you to be a better leader in a number of ways, not just for your own organisation, but also for your peers, which is really important too. And again, that's influencing. That's a skill set that's really valuable.
It really is. Yeah, of course I'm going to say that, but I really feel that. I appreciate so much of what you've said, because we were looking at it at the start from, that was my question, was, what do members, how do members benefit from being in a fellowship of their CEO peers? And we were looking, first of all, at the first perspective of receiving. What are they going to receive from all of that? But what you said about contributing to someone else's success is so enriching. That's where there is that mutual enrichment, where somebody can show up to give, and in so doing, receive so much more. As you said, it validates their own experience. It's a contribution that's really quite difficult to measure, but everyone knows because they feel it. as part of the discussion, and they're able to take away things that they otherwise wouldn't have because of somebody's generosity of sharing those insights and experiences. Yeah.
And it can be tough. Generous sharing of experiences isn't always gentle.
No.
And it's amazing that how open to it you are as a member, from, as I say, from people that you may never come across in your business and personal life anyway. It's a diverse group that a chair assembles. And so it's not always easy, but it's more often than not, valuable and impactful.
Yes. That's been my experience, absolutely, and I'm only witnessing, the things that go on between the members. Stephanie, the sales revolution talks about customer consciousness, where everyone has a customer and is a customer. What do you believe are the benefits to companies that understand that customers can be both internal as well as the obvious external customers?
I mean, I feel like organisations have been talking about this for years, and whether they mean it or not. I mean, obviously there's a benefit to the culture and what it feels like to work in a place like that. A huge benefit, and that shouldn't be minimised. But I also think there's such a benefit towards a drive to results, and a strategic benefit for it. Yes. Because everyone in the organisation sees their place in customer satisfaction one way or another. And so everyone in an organisation touches an external customer in some way. And you can't be successful if your team doesn't see that, if they don't recognise that. And I have worked for different sizes of organisations, different kinds of organisations, when that customer service has been truly on display, and when it hasn't been. Yeah. And we both know what it's like when you fit wherever you fit in an organisation and no one responds to your email. What does that actually feel like? And it doesn't make a person feel valued. Right. So I think the culture can never be underestimated, and the saying is about that a happy and engaged team is going to deliver better for your customers. Yeah. But I think it's just strengthening that muscle of customer success, customer satisfaction, when everyone in the organisation treats their peers or other teams or other departments like a customer. Mm.
We have been talking about that in lots of different forms for years, but there's a difference between knowing and doing, isn't there, Stephanie? So what do you think are the costs to companies that limit their definition of customers to those, either the people or companies that pay us money in exchange for goods and services, as opposed to seeing one another as one another's customers?
Well, I think that you could have a very simplistic view of your organisation.
Right.
In my organisation, it's not straightforward. It's already ambiguous because we have our members who pay to be members, and then we have our chairs who are a key stakeholder group, and we have our wonderful experts like you who are a key stakeholder group. And then there's the within the team communication as well. And I think that the risk is you can be single-minded and you can forget about key stakeholder groups. And then I think the risk internally is it can just lead to massive frustration and inefficiency that downstream is going to directly impact every single stakeholder. Mm. So if someone asks for something from another team and and the person the request has been made of doesn't take any time in discovery to understand why and when and what exactly would good look like and what do you need, then it's just going to be a less than 100% response. And if you think that a business exists to deliver to the customer, well, then down the track, that's going to impact the customers for sure. Because businesses don't just exist to be a business. There has to be a reason for it.
Right. Well, you're right. And, when you said about, the questions that you ask in discovery, and then I think about lots of organisations, I mean, sales, we hope, definitely comes with those skills or is trained in developing some of those skills. It's quintessential to being successful in delivering the outcomes that your organisation needs. That said, the rest of the organisation may not see that they need those skills. What's been your experience, or what would be your advice to organisations that might be listening, or to leaders that are listening to this, saying, yes, we need to, we need to be thinking about one another as customers. We need to be asking better questions. We need to be understanding the purpose of what it is that we're doing and how that helps that other person achieve their goals, and then how that relates then to the end customer. How can they go about doing that?
I saw we had an event at Sydney Swans.
I saw that. Yes, on LinkedIn. Yes.
Yeah, just kept that one going on LinkedIn. It was a bit of a photo I loved, but we were so lucky. It was one of our chairs actually is very involved with the Swans, so we were at Swans headquarters. And we had Tom Harley, the CEO of the Swans, talking to us. And it was something really simple that he talked about. And he talked about the flywheel for the organisation and what the flywheel of success looks like. And, this is an AFL football team, so you'd think it'd be pretty straightforward. And then he talked about the organisation, which wasn't just the players and the management coaching staff. It wasn't just the team, the organisation, the back office team. It was about the whole organisation. And he talked about everyone having, I can't remember his words, I have to look it up, but everyone having a primary role on the flywheel. That your role might be to win a football game. But then everyone has a secondary role as well. So the person in accounts payable has a primary role, but has a secondary role on the flywheel as well. And the football player has a primary role, but then they've got a secondary role too. And I think it does come back to people understanding where do they sit in the organisation? Yeah. What's their place? What's their primary role on the flywheel for the organisation? And when I look at ours for Vistage, everyone here has a role in that flywheel. And so someone who might, in a traditional way of viewing an organisation, saying, well, I just do X, I'm nothing to do with that, I just do X. I'm nothing to do with the results, I just do my bit. This approach allows, it's kind of everyone's equal in a way, in that everyone has a first role to play and then a secondary role to play. And I think that's how a leader can get around it. And it was just wonderful to see Tom Harley's approach. And other leaders I've seen too. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. And I know that is simple, and you sort of alluded to that at the start. But simplicity brings with it clarity quite often, and that's what this is really all about. And I think that at in its simplest form, that could go a long way for leaders to be able to communicate, so that everybody is able to to clearly articulate and understand then what it means to deliver effectively on their primary role within the organisation, and their secondary role. And so coming back to that person in accounts, if that person understood, well, of course, it's to get invoices out on time, or it's to follow up outstanding payments, or it's to do whatever. That's the obvious one. But the secondary one is to set up those customer relationships in such a way the customers want to pay on time, that they consistently pay on time, and understanding then what the value delivered back to the organisation is when that happens, which is certainty around cash flow, certainty that enables us to better resource plan, certainty that enables sales to then understand, what that pipeline means and when revenue is going to be realised. That's a really good tool there, that flywheel. I'm going to put that in my back pocket, Stephanie. Thank you for that. That's amazing. Now, given your current role as Managing Director and your 25-year sales leadership career history, I think you have a unique viewpoint about the way the sales landscape has changed. What are some of the things that are making selling harder in the current landscape?
I was thinking about the sales challenger, back to HBR in a book. And at one point I worked for CEB. Now that book came out, I think in 2009. And it was talking about how the sales landscape has changed. And I think it changes and it doesn't change. I mean, that piece of work then did allude to the idea that just a relationship isn't enough. And perhaps that's where the traditional idea of a salesperson, I don't know if I said it to you when we're on our podcast, but my husband and I were buying a used car years ago, second-hand car. And we were at a car yard and we went, oh, no, I don't think that's it. No, or we were kind of going to walk away. And the guy said, do you like rugby? Do you want tickets to go and see the Warringah Rats play rugby? And we were like, and we walked away and we just laugh about it all the time. Like, well, yeah, we do like rugby, but we weren't looking for rugby tickets. We were looking for a car. So that kind of old-fashioned, matey ideas, whatever you've got, it probably hasn't worked for years anyway. And I think, that the sales challenger or those kind of conversations perhaps highlighted that there's different sorts of selling skill.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing is people do so much research now.
Yeah.
They know who you are. I mean, you just need to look at your own LinkedIn and see who's looking at you all the time.
Yeah.
They know who you are. They know what your organisation does. They know what it stands for. They know who the people are that you've hired. They know who the people are that have left. And so they are really informed. People are so informed now when they're coming to a sale. Back to cars. The last two cars that I have bought, I haven't driven before I bought them. And at one point, the dealer said, do you want to drive? And I went, well, and it was a nice car. I went, well, it's an ex-car, isn't it? I assume it drives. That's a given. People do so much research now, so much research before they ever talk to you.
Yeah.
And so the expectation of salespeople, I think, is higher now than it's ever been. There's an expectation that you can speak the language of leaders. There's an expectation that it will be seamless as a prospective customer to do business with you. And it's B2B, I guess, is my area of expertise. Yeah. There's an expectation of, that it'll be easy. It'll be easy for someone to research you, easy for someone to buy from you. And internally now, well, for me, there will always be an expectation that there's a sales process. That I think winging it, being good at it, and I mean, this is old stuff, but no, it still happens actually. But a salesperson saying, they love me. It's not enough. Well, it was never enough either. But those things, I think sales leaders are so much more tuned into the metrics and the science and the art of selling now. Mm-hmm. And I think for someone who wants to be good at sales, they need to perform in that way also.
Yeah, I agree. Isn't it interesting, as you were talking about the informed customer, who, doesn't need to go for a test drive, who understands exactly what they're doing. They're looking at other customer reviews, they're looking at the star ratings, they're looking at, they're doing their research online, they're asking questions before they even have any kind of interaction with a salesperson. It's interesting that you say that, customers have an elevated expectation of salespeople today, that it's going to be seamless. Because here's what I've seen playing out on the flip side of that. So if that's true, with customers being, having higher expectations, here's what I'm seeing that they're met with, which is, where can it all go wrong? So high expectations. I've seen, because of that same phenomenon of customers being well researched and knowing what they're wanting, blah, 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 that salespeople have gone in like an order taker. And, and their reasoning is the customer's educated, the customer knows what they want. Now, they might not think that they're being order takers. They might actually think that they're facilitators of a purchase. I've even seen that written down like that's some kind of word on high from some thought leaders out there quite recently, actually. And yet the behaviour is still unsophisticated. It might be a lot colder and less warm than the matey guy who, they love me, that kind of guy. But there's no real acceptance of process, like you said. So I'm sort of seeing, I really value that perspective about the expectations of the corporate customer. And then I'm saying what I'm observing over here, which is the order taker / glorified customer service person over here, that there's a complete mismatch. And then we wonder why sales has become, a dirty word.
Well, and we also wonder why sales aren't successful enough.
Right.
Isn't that interesting? Because I think I do see that along the way as well, Ingrid. And you don't ever want to say, back in my day, you worked a lot harder for it. But what is that? Is that generational, or is it just because it's a lot easier to take orders, isn't it?
It is. I don't think it's just generational. I see it from all generations, unfortunately. I think it comes off the back of really, really good economic times, where there is less adversity and less risk to making a purchase decision from the customer's perspective. So I think that they've been a lot more forgiving in the past of that lack of sophistication. And as long as that person's been reasonably, credible, they've done a little bit of research, they're better than the others, then they'll get the business. It doesn't necessarily mean that they've been really commercial even about their approach, but they've been better than the rest, so they've got the business. Where I think it's now coming to hurt businesses that haven't invested in their salespeople, and so that's been coupled with a lack of investment in the professional development of salespeople as well, because it's been a buoyant market and we're still getting sales outcomes, so we don't need to. It's only when people start to see sales becoming harder, for all of the reasons that we've mentioned, and we've got very tight economic times at the moment, so there's a lot more risk, there's a lot more challenge, there's less propensity to spend. People's focus is on saving and, profitability. So where does that going to come from? So I need to really think about every single purchase that I'm making. If a salesperson hasn't got that next level of sophistication around their skill, their communication, their commercial acumen, they're going to miss out. So, Yeah, I think it's the perfect storm of conflation, I think, at the moment.
Well, it is. And so it's way back to, I guess, the, research or the novel, the book we were talking about from
Yeah,
2009. It's
yeah,
kind of the same thing, isn't it?
yeah,
Because it is getting tougher,
yeah,
even if the sentiment it's getting tougher, whether it is or isn't. And you're right that there is in these times so much more that's needed and expected of salespeople from the organisation with the sales team,
yeah,
and then the customers have a higher threshold to when they're going to buy.
yeah.
I could talk to you all day about this, Ingrid.
Back at you. Stephanie, what do you think's the opportunity wrapped up in that challenge that we've just unpacked to the nth degree there?
I think there's a huge opportunity for salespeople who want to be very good to really hone their craft and absolutely rise above the rest. I think it can be career making for good salespeople who really want to learn
Yeah.
and who recognise that it's going to be harder than it may have been 12 months ago, and that's exciting because that will demonstrate true sales skills. It's an opportunity for organisations to invest in training their salespeople, and I absolutely believe in that.
Yeah.
And again, that's the fun and the art of sales leadership, just to keep tweaking and working and tweaking and kind of problem solving and saying, oh yeah, we could do better at this, let's practice it. But I think the opportunities for good salespeople to become great through this,
Yes.
and there is a wonderful career for great salespeople in whatever market, in a bad market and a good market.
Yes. And by extension, too, those organisations that have great salespeople, they can really carve out, a competitive advantage where others, won't be able to, if they're willing to cultivate that next level of salesperson. Amazing, Stephanie. You're right, we could talk all day. But thank you so much for everything that you bring. Thank you for the service that you provide through Vistage Australia and New Zealand. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Ingrid, thank you. It's wonderful to talk to you every time. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.